how? How could they do this? How could they take these characters and make something so boring? This first reaction is brought to you by viewers like you. Thank you. I took my time with this video because I had hope. I had hope and a massive prayer that the slow disappointment I felt creeping into my watch of the series was unfounded. I was so stoked for this series at the start. Like, I love Fate. All of it. I am a big fan of both Waver's character from Zero and his countless appearance as Lord El-Melloi himself throughout the Fate universe. This series had Yuki Kajira. She's coming back to compose for Fate. That's big news. There's also this new character called Gray, who, while being a Saberface, has an interesting backstory with ties to the Fate mythos surrounding King Arthur. Like, there is so many reasons why I was hyped for this show. And then I watched it. I spent time trying to come to grips with myself about if this show is actually bad or if it just did not meet my expectations. Like, the latter is definitely true, but in the end, well, to spoil this whole video, the end is that the case files of Lord El-Melloi II is not bad in a traditional sense. It's just boring, undercooked, and contains facets that were unutilized and just overall depressing. So, what's it about? Well, 10 years after the events of Fate Zero, the young Waver has taken up temporarily being the head of house for his former mentor, Kenneth El-Melloi, until such a time that Kenneth's young sister is old enough to take the mantle. Meanwhile, he has also begun teaching at London's Clock Tower and has gained a reputation for being exceptionally good at teaching magecraft, even if he himself has many issues in performing it. The series, in essence, is supposed to be this new Lord El-Melloi getting involved with magical mysteries throughout London and the surrounding areas. He goes around solving these mysteries with his wit and detective ability alongside his protégés from the Clock Tower and his young apprentice Gray, whose origins are unexplained at the start. Ooh, mystery! But after the initial episodes of reintroduction to the world and Waver's current circumstance, it becomes quite clear to me at least, that this mystery anime didn't really have any idea what makes a good mystery, or even a good story for that matter. The characters are not the problem, and if anything, it's more perplexing that something took this long to become in any way interesting with the veritable who's who of Fate characters from this time period. Any character that could conceivably be in London just before the events of the original Fate Stay Night makes an appearance, even if they're from other side stories. Fate Apocrypha, despite taking place in an alternate reality, gets plenty of representation by simply showing what some of those characters are doing in the Prime Fate universe. Luvia finally escapes her side gig of being the Naga to Rin's Lena inverse and gets plenty of spotlight, and even a young Olga Marie appears at age 11, before the events of the Fate Grand Order prologue she stars in. But too often I found that these cameos from other Fate stories were presented almost as an apology for the story that they are in to not be able to keep our attention on its own. Going off just the first 6 episodes, there's very little mystery actually present. Phoenix Wright games have more mystery, and that's really saying something. The best way that I can describe the amount of mystery here, it's as if someone read the cliff notes of an Agatha Christie book and suddenly figured out that they just know how mystery works, and all they have to do is shout out some keywords.
How done it?
Why done it?
これでは3問ミステリーだ。
I persevered through it though, not just because of my love of these characters, but also because I knew that despite the show being announced as one whole cour, that they also announced that the only arc from the original novels they were going to adapt was the Rail Zeppelin storyline, which kicks in starting at about episode 7. Every episode before that was anime only. And it shows. When the real story finally kicks in, though, a part of me is still disappointed. But why? because I spent the first 6 weeks of this show's airing lamenting privately of how it's just like someone whiffed an Agatha Christie novel over the script, thinking that would imbibe it with a good mystery story, only for the first actual adaptation to start on a train with a murder. Orient Express much? This is a series that is clearly for pre-existing fans of Fate and not fans of mystery. The value of any individual episode in the first half is directly tied to your appreciation to any callback that episode makes to other Fate media, rather than value in and of itself as an episode. And it's just tragic considering all of the absolutely wonderful characters at play. Maybe this is just me, but I needed more than just these characters to be on screen together. I wanted them to, do something. We get glimpses at the beginning about how Waver has changed over the years since Fate Zero, and that's quite appreciated. But even such an intrinsic question like, who is Gray, is left up to the viewer to piece together from info that's barely given in scraps. I know more about Gray as a character because I had to look it up. It'll eventually be showcased as the novel does dedicate an arc to it, but the anime, at least in this season, won't be getting to that, which is even more depressing. It's just a weird choice in my mind. Like they had a full core to fill, plenty of material to adapt, but instead of starting with the Rail Zeppelin plotline after an introduction and then continuing with further stories, they decided to make stuff up for almost the first half of the season. I really would like to know the reason behind going anime only at the start and not adapting anything that could have helped the series, be more exciting. The problem... Okay, well, maybe I'm trying to wrap this up as if there's only one singular problem, and there's not. But one of the problems ultimately was that I found I just had the wrong expectations going into the show. Like I can't even talk. I had a high standard that was not being met. I thought the precedent of being a series that directly follows the events of Fate Zero, one of the high points of the Fate franchise, was going to lead to a base level of enjoyment attached with the expectation that this was going to be a mystery series that just happens to take place in the Fate universe. I wasn't expecting it to be as good as Fate Zero. I was just hoping that it was going to be better than that one Fate Extra adaptation, which, to be fair, is a low bar, and I think El-Melloi did actually surpass that. The Fate Extra was just absolute trash. This is just boring. There's a difference. And I keep coming back to my gripe that it's not a mystery. Because it's not, though. There are loose elements of a mystery present, but not enough, I would argue, to call it a mystery anime. Episode 5 is just the 3 main female characters getting trapped in a mall. How did they get out? Oh, well, you just blow up the defense system and walk on out. Did we really need a full episode dedicated to that? It didn't even develop their characters at all. If we had like some meaningful character development, that could justify it, but we didn't. And what about the sewer episode? The one that's just like this weird gauntlet of magical enemies and then has Waver showing up at the end bluffing a guy into surrendering? There's no mystery here. Half the entertainment and excitement in a mystery story is when the audience or the reader can engage with the work and attempt to solve the mystery alongside the detective. But this is where Case Files fails, because it's the type of story that keeps several key pieces of the mystery hidden from the audience, only to trot them out at the last moment by the show's lead to make them seem smarter than virtually everyone. I call this the Stephen Moffat Sherlock approach to mystery. The audience can't follow along because it's impossible to. Waver can just waltz in and figure out who the murderer is by examining a magical ritual circle, but unless the audience happens to have a degree in that sort of thing, we're at the whim of the writer to show us the intended path, and it removes half of the excitement and enjoyment of this kind of fiction. Like, we all know that any mystery will most likely be solved by the end of the story. The knowledge that the detective will solve the thing is 90% of the time assumed from the start. So the enjoyment is figuring it out either at the same time that they do or before they do. You can't do that when the detective knows things that we don't. they just get really focused on the aha audience, I got you moment at the end. But when that happens every time, it's just tiring. Now, the Rail Zeppelin arc isn't over yet, but with 5 out of 6 episodes released, I find it hard to believe that its conclusion will be so massive as to make up for the disappointment I feel with the rest of the story so far. Like, I'm still gonna watch it, because, you know, in this house, we stan Waver Velvet and Grey, but still, we can chalk this up also to just being a poor adaptation, if we want, or however else I could decide to place blame on why I didn't really enjoy it myself like I thought I would. But ultimately, at this point in time, with the history of watching a bunch of Fate anime behind me, the case files of Lord El-Melloi II doesn't feel like anything I could recommend. To non-Fate fans, there's literally nothing here of value. Absolutely none. And to even fans who loved Waver's character from Fate Zero, there's plenty here worth skipping for all but the most ardent fans that just need to experience absolutely everything regardless of quality. I wish it were not so, but my wishes have very little effect on reality. So thank you for joining me on this quick discussion. There will be streaming links down in the description, should you require them, as well as a 14-day trial from our good friends over at Crunchyroll for their premium service if you find yourself in need of it. Let me know down in the comments. I'm just so dejected. Let me know down in the comments what you have been following this season, and we might be talking about it in a future video, but the season's almost over, so, you know, it's probably better to start looking into next season. So do that. A big thank you to my patrons who make these videos possible. Specifically though, as I like to do, I want to give particular shoutouts to patrons Sid Yamako, Ryfen Bonaparte, Rune Jacobson, Calhoun Boy, Richard Bradley, and Hector Montemayor for being especially awesome. You guys are great. And until next time, where I'm sure we'll talk about something I like, except I know what next time is, and unless things change, that's not gonna happen. Until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, stay frosty, and watch more anime. Just not this one.